pandemic is declared, things absolutely spiraled into a disaster. People were put into situations that they never in their whole lives dreamed they would have to. Sometimes hourly, they were holding up an iPad or holding a telephone so people could say goodbye. But there's people who can't even talk about it. They can't even go there. I'm thinking of one person in particular. It's absolutely upended their life so terrible bad that they did attempt suicide.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. I am your host, Todd Rennebaum. Well, I got another wonderful episode for you here this week. This week I'm speaking with Tracy Zambory, and she is the president of SUN, and that is Saskatchewan Union of Nurses. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, I'm not from Saskatchewan, so why would this interest me? Well, because I'm pretty sure nurses all over the world are kind of going through the same thing right now. Healthcare systems are still feeling the effects of COVID, either directly with dealing with people with COVID still, or at least dealing with the aftermath of COVID and, you know, some of the mental health issues that the nurses had to deal with just through that chaotic time. And here in Saskatchewan, anyway, for a long time, nurses were considered heroes, and they had parades by hospitals to show their appreciation and stuff. And then within a year, QAnoners and anti-vaxxers are protesting and spitting at nurses as they're trying to enter the hospitals to go to work. That's pretty polarizing. That's pretty extreme extremes. So anyway, Tracy's going to be talking about that and just about her own family and some of the mental health issues there. Next week, I'm speaking with Kristen Carter, and she is an ADHD coach, and she also has her own podcast called I Have ADHD Podcast. Very effective title. Also just a really great podcast. I've learned tons about having ADHD through her podcast, and not just about ADHD, but some strategies and tools you can use and stuff. So I highly recommend checking her podcast out. And I just want to say a quick thank you to everyone that's been sending comments and questions and leaving ratings and reviews. It's very, very, very much appreciated. The more ratings and reviews that the podcast gets, the easier it is to be found, and that is very important for a lot of people. A lot of people are finding help listening to the podcast, listening to my guests, relating and not feeling alone, finding help, finding treatment for things that they are going through. So please rate and review and tell people, word of mouth, tell some people that you think might like the podcast. Anyway, it's a bit of a long episode this week, so I'm going to get right to it. And so without further ado, I give you Tracy Zambory.
Well, my great-grandmother was, back in the day, probably in the 1930s, was stricken with bouts of, back in the day, what they called hysteria. And then she'd go into a depression. Modern day bipolar. And she spent a considerable amount of time in North Battleford at Sask Hospital. My great-grandfather would have to take her on the train to try to get her there. And she would have extreme periods of grandiosity, and then she would become paranoid. She was also extremely religious, to the point where it was almost like in itself a mania, an addiction that she was afflicted with. So I never knew her. She died a year before I was born, but her illness it really was like the family. My grandfather's family functioned around that illness. And it played itself out in any of his siblings, but it affected how they were able to function, and the ability to have relationships and trusting people, and it was such dysfunction in their family. They didn't really themselves know how to be in relationship with people. My grandfather was very much an enabler. he was the one in the family who tried to make everything just right. So he married my grandmother, whom I was extremely close to, but their relationship was not a good one. It was not, there was nothing healthy there. And out of that came my mother and my uncle and my aunt, who were not able to function correctly. It wasn't until myself and my sisters and brother that we decided that we did not want to continue on with that kind of illness being so predominant. Now, no one else has been actually diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but there certainly has been dysfunction. My oldest son has got pretty significant attention deficit disorder, as does his father. My husband has, not related to my husband. So, and I myself have attention deficit disorder as well. It's mild, but still, definitely, because I'm easily distracted. I can do a lot of things at one time, but I can be doing something and be distracted and go do something else and then forget about that thing over there and finish up that. But I can, most of the time I can control it. But when I was younger, when you get older and you can think these things through and understand exactly what they mean, it did affect my ability to concentrate in school. And I was very much a procrastinator and last minute but from my great grandmother, that her illness, that was never, and back in the day, they called it, of course, the mental. So nobody wanted to go to the mental, right? And having mental illness, you certainly did not talk about it in the way that we do today. Even our oldest son, Adam, who is going to be 35 or is 35, just turned 35, actually, on the 10th of April. It was difficult managing his attention deficit disorder because of the stigma and my family still being very much, you just don't talk about it. And that did Adam absolutely no favors. Now that he's a grown man and he's able to manage it a bit better, we tried the Ritalin and did that pathway, and that did not work out at all. Wasn't it? I think, maybe there's some people who do well with Ritalin. I'm not sure. I'm not sure really how great the success is with that. And then our youngest son, Wesley, became a full-blown addict.
Was your oldest son, was he diagnosed when he was a kid?
Yes. Yeah. He was in school. For Adam was very, very difficult. Here in a prairie school. Well, I'm not sure any school in Saskatchewan was all that great in helping kids that had learning disorders, honestly, unless you had the magical formula of an attentive principal and teachers who were willing to work with you. It really didn't happen very well. And in grade 2, when I think back on it now, it's just unreal that this kid had to go through that, because he's very smart. He is a masterful guitar player. He makes guitars, yeah, lives out. Yeah, he's something, and he's done well for himself. The teacher looked right at me, his teacher, and said he was, and this is I can hardly say the word because it's just such an ugly word, but she used it. She called him a retard. And yeah, if you can imagine this little boy in grade 2, because back in whatever year that was, that's when they did a really big switch with the math, and they completely changed the math on how we do math. And it was done with these, what looked like a little pieces of Lego, and he could not compute it. And that's when things went downhill for Adam. And he wasn't able to finish school here in our hometown, but he was able to go to community college, and he graduated with full grade 12 once he was an adult.
Yeah, it's weird. Actually, I was just having this conversation with some relatives yesterday about how they keep changing the strategies for math and English and stuff like that, or math especially. And it's even my kids when they were younger, it was like, I don't get it. I couldn't even help them with their
Me
math because they
either.
keep changing. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's trying to explain it to me. I'm like, I have no idea what you're doing. But yeah, and to have like just one or two strategies just because a kid or a couple kids don't understand that particular strategy to just label them something like that right away. I mean, that was probably 30 years ago, but still even then 30 years ago, I don't think that word was really
Well, it shouldn't have been.
politically correct.
Well, absolutely
Yeah.
not. And it there was no room, and I actually feel it's probably the same way today. There was no real room. As much as they talk about it, they don't walk it. There's no room for kids who have a learning disorder. At least not in smaller schools. And I mean, I sat on the school board here as the community liaison for one term, and I mean, they try to do the best they can, but I think it's still, if you are a kid with difficulties, you are labeled, you're not, things are different for you. There's just no two ways about it. And it had a real profound effect on Adam for a lot of years. His self-esteem was in the toilet. And but thank God, I mean, he did his fair share of dabbling in drugs. I know he did. He drank and smoked a lot of pot. Still does that. But he was able to not let it overtake him. And Wesley, our youngest one, was a different story. He in university found OxyContin, and then that was the end of that.
Was he prescribed it at first?
No, his
or
friend was. His friend was, and they decided they would crush it and snort it and give that a try, and that was that. He went.
Is he?
Go ahead.
Sorry, is he still using?
No, he is, since 2019, he has been on methadone, and he's actually in the process right now of weaning off. It is, and it's actually quite a rigorous process, and it makes it impossible to, at least for him, to hold down gainful employment. So he's on social assistance. So I have firsthand knowledge that social assistance in this province is not anywhere near adequate for someone to live. I mean, my husband and I, give him almost as much each month that he gets from social assistance to help him survive. He couldn't survive without it. I probably shouldn't say that out loud. Just my luck, someone from social services will hear and decide that they should cut him off.
Just because you're supporting him as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, you never know. Yeah, God damn it. And it's true. Yeah, I mean, I love Saskatchewan. I love where I'm from, but it could really use a booster shot for social services in general and just how they treat their vulnerable. I'm finding that myself. My wife, so I don't make very much money because of my own issues. So I work part-time and stuff. And I was just diagnosed with ADHD, and the medication it's pretty expensive. It's $180 if you don't have a plan. And I maxed out our plan in the first 2 months of the year. So now the meds have been life-changing for me. It's like, wow, this is how life should be. Like, with my own struggles of addiction and anxiety and depression, suicide attempts, and now it's like, I was full of confidence and stuff, and now it's like, oh, now there goes that confidence, because now I feel like a burden again because I'm I'm not working much, and my meds have now like quadrupled in price. So it's and people keep saying, well, go on the Saskatchewan drug plan or whatever they call it, and I was like, I am, and yeah. I don't want to get into details about how the drug plan works, but even on it's not great. But
Yeah.
But I'm getting by. I'm not poor or anything. I'm not. I would say I'm the most vulnerable people in the province, but I'm just saying, even someone who isn't the most vulnerable, it's hard. So I couldn't imagine being someone that is extremely vulnerable.
And you become completely invisible when you are the most vulnerable. And thank God, Todd, that we, yes, we can talk about how tough it is, but as a matter of fact, but we can say that, and there are others worse off, but that doesn't mean that we downplay the fact that we've had struggles and that there's sometimes it's hard to cope, and our own self-esteem, mine included, when I say ours, I mean you and I, can
Mm-hmm.
still we can still feel badly and still feel like a burden and still feel like we're not good enough, we don't belong, and perhaps if I wasn't around, things would be better. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that you can't, nobody has the inside track on all of that or the ownership of it. Most of the uh, there's a lot of people who live right in the heart of the richest part of Regina that are extremely ill and having a difficult time, and all the fucking money in the world doesn't make a difference now, does it?
No, no.
They're still going to suffer, still going to have troubles. The only leg up they've got is to be able to afford to send somebody to, private care, I guess. But if you're not willing to get better, again, all the money in the world isn't going to help. You can go to 65,000 different rehabs, but if you're not in the spot of wellness, doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't
Mm-hmm.
matter.
That's right. Yeah, I know lots of people that I met in Pine Lodge, which is free. Um, they've been in treatments all over the country that some of them were $20,000-$30,000 for them to go to, and it's just the illness, and it doesn't discriminate.
No, absolutely not.
And I'm
Absolutely.
not just saying addiction, like mental, any kind of mental illness. It doesn't discriminate,
It
and
certainly
yeah,
does.
yeah, you're right. I know people that are not vulnerable at all, like you said, and still feel like a burden. So yeah, it's all validated. All our feelings are validated, I think.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, or they should be anyway.
Mhm. And having my own struggles with my own, depression, anxiety, led me though to a really great thing, led me to the 12-step world, which to me is extremely important to be in. I'm in the rooms for my own issues of codependency and my own issues with food addiction, my own, issues of self-esteem, and also, seeing what it means to be vulnerable, to be, to have integrity, generosity. Learning about emotional intelligence helped me find a really good place, so that, my husband and I work on that quite regularly.
Hmm.
To me, that is the foundation of being a good person in society. And it helps with leadership skills. It helps with, being a real person. You can find your way in life much, much easier. It's much more satisfying, far less tense. And boundaries are hard. Boundaries is another big one that I've learned in the last number of years, and they're hard. It people You worry what people are going to think when you make a boundary, and that's the main reason you need to make a boundary. Because, you know if someone doesn't like a boundary that I've set, that's not my problem, it's actually theirs, right? So,
Bingo. Yeah.
and that takes some learning and some accepting, um understanding the only person that I can manage is myself, and
Yeah.
that's it at the end of
Yeah.
the day.
It's very tough going from being to never saying no and wanting to be a people pleaser and have everyone liking you to I have to say no sometimes, and that might mean someone takes it personally. And that is like, it sounds simple, but it is really really hard.
Oh yeah, it is, and people who haven't walked down these roads or been in the rooms, it's easy. I'm very happy for them, but I'm never going to be there. I'm always be in recovery, always. And having the relationship with my higher power, and um, that my recovery comes first, and it has to. That's just the bottom line of that. And it's just a whole new way of looking at the world. That, there's still days when things are bleak and I'm not in a good spot, but now I have some tools to deal with that I never had before. And that's made a huge, huge difference in how I can live day to day.
It was life-saving for me. I haven't been to a meeting in a long time since COVID, actually, since the meeting shut down around here. But boy, was it helpful in my early recovery, the first 5 years or whatever. I still, even though I haven't been going to meetings, I still like to follow the program. I still have slogans and things around my house and stuff. You don't get it unless you get it. But
Right.
when I went to treatment, I was 28 days treatment, but it was about my third week. I realized, I was like, I think everybody should come to a place like this. I mean, it's just good life skills. Like you said, it can help you in leadership. It can help you in so many places in your life. It's a good, long, hard sit down, look at yourself in the mirror, and then give you these nice tools and this nice way of living. And it does make my day-to-day life is so much easier to live now using the 12 steps and going through that program. And addiction or not, I think it's just a really great program.
I couldn't agree more. And the leadership philosophies that I follow parallel all of the 12 steps. It's amazing how to be a good person inside of yourself and out in the world is really all reflected in that. And I think it is, it's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's so good.
I've read lots of like self-help things, or I've read a lot of therapy modalities and stuff. And you're right. A lot of it does parallel the 12 steps. Or, it's very similar. It's like, hey, that's basically, this is a long-winded way of saying step 7, or whatever, it's like a whole chapter on steps. Like, oh, man, those guys that came up with that 12 steps, man, I don't know if the universe and the stars aligned to that, but
well, it did for them after years of misery. Bill W. and the doctor, they did what they needed to do, and absolutely.
Yeah, I didn't realize. So that's interesting that you are part of a 12-step group, and so was there a specific one that you don't have to tell me?
Yeah, well, no, it's okay. I'm good, fine with it. Well, Readers Anonymous, because I'm a compulsive reader. That's how I deal with problems. I stuff them down or did with food. Yeah.
Okay.
In the height of Wesley's addiction and with Adam's difficulties, it was the outlet that I had to have, because I'm a registered professional. If I get caught with any sort of illegal substances or in trouble with the law, it is not good. It could ruin everything. So there had to be another way to let my emotions out, right? Or thought I was.
Right. Whereabouts are you? Are you in Regina?
No, I'm in the southeast corner of the province in Stoughton.
Oh, okay. For some reason, I thought you were in the city.
No, I live there during the week, but the house that we own, where I worked as a nurse, is here in Stoughton.
Oh, you're a nurse in Stoughton? Sorry, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm on leave from my job. I'm on a paid union leave with Sun.
Gotcha. And as the president of Sun, Saskatchewan Union of Nurses, there's been an ad running in some of the episodes of mine, and it's not. It doesn't give it a cheery outlook of what nurses are going through right now. Right. And I don't know if that's just the province or if it's a national thing or an international thing. And does it all boil down to COVID, or was it kind of heading that way anyway, that nurses are going to getting overwhelmed and putting in these intense hours and understaffed and all this stuff?
Well, COVID actually tore the bandage right off. We were starting to see some short staffing start to crop up. Is back, just to rewind the clock a little bit. We were about 1,000 registered nurses short 2008, 2009. Things were really bad then too. But we did not have a pandemic stacked on top of that. So it wasn't quite as alarming, or did not have the same kind of effect on people's mental health. And so, and plus, we were able to get some relief. Brad Walls was premier at that time. And, for political reasons, we were able to work with them. And they wanted to help with the nursing crisis back in 2008, 2009. We signed a Sun government partnership in 2010. And then we were able to work together with the health authority to start digging ourselves out, and we did. So fast forward to March of 2020, pandemic is declared, and things absolutely spiraled into a disaster, and people were put into situations that they never in their whole lives dreamed they would have to. Sometimes hourly they were holding up a iPad or holding a telephone so people could say goodbye. It was like there's people who can't even talk about it. They can't even go there. I'm thinking of one person in particular. It's absolutely upended their life so terrible bad that, they did contemplate suicide, attempted suicide. And, this person that I'm thinking of is just one of lots that have gone through that. Extreme burnout, no support, a government that doesn't listen, a health authority that doesn't listen. There is no respect. And then, we're getting ourselves through COVID, and then out comes a budget, a provincial budget. Well, prior to that came a health human resource strategy. But this health human resource strategy did not give anything or even pay any homage at all to the mid to late career registered nurses, who are the people who have held it together this last amount of time. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of younger nurses that have done that, but the majority of our membership are mid to late career nurses. And they receive no recognition, no monetization, no nothing in this recruitment. They looked more to recruitment of going to the Philippines. If you pay attention to the news, that's really all they talk about. So that was like a body blow to people when that strategy came out, and there was nothing in that strategy to keep the mid to late career, to retain anyone. And then if we fast forward to the budget, that was a rinse and repeat. And it was even more of a blow. And so now we are up to, I believe last count, almost 860 full-time equivalent vacancies in the system, which for patients and people of this province, there should be, people should be, screaming from the mountaintops that we have a big problem here. And we have registered nurses who are saying, I cannot do this. I'm leaving. They've accessed care more than ever before for psychological care. There is
the nurses have themselves, you mean?
Absolutely, yes. And we as an organization have been offering wellness since the beginning of COVID, knowing that people were feeling so incredibly stressed. And the sad part, or ironic, I don't even know what word to use with it anymore. At the beginning of the pandemic, there was the banging of the pots and pans, and there was all of the, people jumping in to say what heroes and what can we do, and let's do this and that, and such recognition to being by now, you can't, the disrespect is outrageous. People are calling them killers. They're being spat at and shouted at by these people who are this conspiracy theorists who are, tied to the most nonsensical, non-science, crazy way of thinking. And, the social media has really helped that immensely for these people to get traction to say and do the most outrageous things. We all just heard that they've stopped masking, period. Nobody has to mask. And organizationally, Sun came out and said, well, you people, this isn't, we made it clear, this isn't about what people do in their personal lives and going out to Sobeys or whatever. That ship has sailed when it comes to masking. But in hospital, people go there expecting to be protected. And I mean, all you have to do is listen to the news. There's more people dying of COVID now than ever before. COVID has not gone away. And now in hospital, I know people who've been in, just recently had surgery, massive surgery, a real complicated surgery, and ended up sick with COVID whilst in hospital. Why are we allowing this to happen? So we, organizationally, we were asked what our opinion was on that. We gave it. Like, the least we can do in hospital, in facility, is wear a mask. And it was like midst of COVID, and all of the people who have gone quiet came out loud and clear, and with the threats and the saying the terrible things and calling us names, and it's all right back. And it's like a PTSD situation for our members who have to go through that.
God, yeah, I can only imagine. I get a bad email or something criticizing one of my guests or something I said on the podcast, and it's heartbreaking. I could imagine, like, you're a healthcare worker saving lives, going to work, and there's mobs of people. I don't know if they're still out there, but during the pandemic, yeah, mobs of people protesting you going to work to save lives. It's just bananas. To this day, I still can't believe that. And it's all coming from like weird right-wing extremists from the United States, and it trickles up here, and it's just bananas.
It absolutely is. And, I'll never forget, there was a group of people who were so vicious, so crazy, so out of control, that they went around to the staff entrance and the emergency entrance at the general hospital and wrote all over the place, "serial killers." And members came out of there and they were just heartbroken, devastated. I couldn't believe it. So I remember there was a couple of wonderful women who came and stood out there and tried to clean it off, and also shouted affirmations and wonderful things to people as they were coming out. There's far more good people than there are people who are cruel and conspiracy theorists. Mm-hmm. We just need to hear a little bit more from the people who are kind, these other people who, what has happened is social media has just given them a platform, because you can hide behind stupid handles on Twitter and not actually have to say who you are, so you can say what you want. And now, Twitter is turned into such a cesspool that because any kind of rule or decorum that was there is gone, it makes it really difficult for people. And registered nurses are suffering. They are suffering, as is the rest of the healthcare team. Anybody that works in healthcare and in any facility, what we call facility, unit, agency, long-term care or home care, public health, mental health, dietary, laundry, environmental services, security guards. My God, if there is people who have put up with, and they are the ones who.
Oh, you're gone. Oh, sorry. You broke up for a good chunk there. You were just about to talk about the security guards.
Well, security also has got dwindling numbers. These are the people, they're short-staffed. And these are the people that, we call for help when we need it. And, and not being listened to. I mean, what we have to do now, though, is we have to find our way out of it. And we're going to have to find our way out of it on our own. Mm-hmm. As much as there's a lot of talk, maybe things happen, they really don't. And so organizationally, we know that we've got to work with our members to pull ourselves out and figure out how we can do things better. I mean, we've had lots of conversations with the health minister and with the premier and with the CEO of the health authority to talk about how we can improve things, make things better. I mean, so far, we really haven't had much of a response, lots of talking, but it's our job to continue to talk, and we will continue to push things like the nursing task force. We will continue to push that we need to have a concrete mental health and addiction strategy in this province, that we need to have support for not just registered nurses, but anyone who has issues with mental health and addictions, because we've, again, another victim, well, not really a victim, but a thing that happened again in the budget that we all saw was that there was no funding for harm reduction, nothing at all given. And, it's an ideology. There's such a lack of understanding on what's harm reduction means and safe consumption sites. And we have to let go of our preconceived notions of how we're going to help people with addictions. And it's not black and white. There is not one size fits all. Mm-hmm. And, when I think about Wesley, I think, it took a number of people to finally get through to him that, if you continue to do this, you're going to kill yourself.
I just did an interview with Kayla DeMong. She's the director of the Prairie Harm Reduction. And I actually asked her the question, is it ideology? Is that why they're not funding you? And she said, I don't think so, because there are so many people that are on all sides of the political spectrum that are donating money and are, giving money or buying clothes or doing whatever to support them. So I don't know if it's just sheer ignorance. I don't understand, because that place runs on 100% volunteers and donations and stuff. And, the provincial budget just came out. They're all patting each other on the back because there's $14 million more going into mental health, which would, you could run 20 safe injection sites for $14 million, but they won't give a penny. I don't understand it. I just don't understand.
It is a head scratcher, but I do know that there is a lot of thought, and always has been, for the extreme right, that mental health is about pulling yourself, in their minds, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Yep. They don't classify it as an illness, that's akin to diabetes. We wouldn't tell a diabetic, oh, you know what, just quit eating all that sugar, smarten up, you don't need to have insulin. What are you talking about? Don't worry about it. It's all your fault. Actually, if you would just, straighten up and fly right, you wouldn't have diabetes anymore. Mm-hmm. And it probably wouldn't even take 48 hours for an insulin dependent diabetic to become ill to the point of potential death. Mm-hmm. But yet, someone who is in active addiction, the thought is that, you just cut yourself off, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Life's not that hard. Just get on with it. Give your head a shake it off, go get a job and start contributing to society, and you'll feel better. Well, any one of us that has suffered a mental illness or an addiction knows that that's absolutely not goddamn possible, is it? Mm-hmm. It's an illness. It's an illness that needs to be treated with medication with some sort of therapy, whether it's talk therapy or in-house treatment or hospitalization. Mm-hmm. with the proper professionals. Registered psychiatric nurses are professionals when it comes to mental health and addictions. But yet, I don't know if you've seen the billboards, and I do have to give our PNAS a shout out here. If you see the billboards around Regina about, there's not enough RPNs in the system, and these are the experts on the ground in mental health. Registered nurses are too, but the education is different. Registered psychiatric nurses have the education to a greater depth and breadth, and mm-hmm. there's all those things that there is. Politics plays a huge role in how we are able to manage mental health and addictions in this province, and that's why I give prairie harm reduction such kudos. And what exactly is happening in Regina? I know there's some things happening, but it's pretty quiet. You certainly don't hear about what's happening in Regina like you do in Saskatoon, and that's not good. We're trying to service the southern half of the province for people with addictions issues. But the seventh time that someone goes into a safe consumption site could be the magical time when they say, you know what, I need help, and I want to quit. And I've come and saw you, Sally, RN, and you've always been so kind, and you've given me all these thoughts, and I've thought and thought and thought about them. Because without that, there is no somebody talking to them, and the potential of them dying on the street goes up exponentially.
Yeah, I could talk for hours about this stuff, but I'm not, because I did with Kayla already. So I'll save it for that episode. It's coming up. But I agree 100% with what you're saying. It's absolutely heartbreaking. And speaking of, so I have a couple. Wow, I actually wrote down a bunch of stuff now. I have a couple points about nursing and mental health and addictions, especially that I used to work at Pine Lodge, the addiction treatment center that I went to, and there was always someone from healthcare in there as a client. It was either EMT, nurses, first responders, whatever. Like always, there was always at least one or two in there. That's a high percentage of one field of work. You know what I mean? Like it was a lot. So I can only imagine being that frustrated with your job and then having to actually use the system that is also kind of shitty.
Right. Well, and it's frustration with the job, but I think it goes a bit deeper than that.
Mm-hmm.
It goes deeper to the fact that, like, let's think about EMTs and paramedics, and wonder about, what kind of my God, the word just went out of my head now too, where we can do a debrief. That's what I'm looking for, because how many situations in a day are they coming across? Many, 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 and even prior to COVID and all of that, the traumatic situations they had to go through, and how much ability do they have with the employer to have a debrief, to be able to process what they've just seen and what they've had to go through. The same for, registered nurse, registered psychiatric nurse practitioners, and it never ends. Like if you work in the emergency, many other places can say, you know what, we're full. You can't take anymore. We can't do anymore. We're going to have to offload this somewhere else. Emergency rooms in this province don't have that luxury, if you want to use that word. They're open 24/7, 365. And they don't turn people away. What happens is they just end up waiting and waiting and waiting because they're so understaffed and so overworked, and ambulances are backed up. And but if you're working in trauma and in the emergency room, there is no stop. There is no closing the doors and putting up the close sign. It's not an option.
Mm-hmm.
So
back in 5 minutes.
Right. Yeah, there isn't that. And no coffee breaks, no meals. Like, add it all up, it becomes something that you cannot continue to do without there being a repercussion. And whilst the employer does some things, they really have not turned into what we call a magnet environment. I mean, one that draws people to it, because they really lack on how people can get help, and what they're willing to offer. And why why are we waiting until someone collapses before we actually intervene? Why are we not working hard together to create a system where we are fully staffed with the right people to do the right job at the right time? Why are we so resistant to these things? Why are we resistant to the healthcare professionals like registered nurses being able to sit at the table and give their ideas? It's all this, constant push-pull tension that has to occur, when in fact, what a registered nurse wants to be able to do is come to work and do their job. and be able to give the best patient care they can. And then they want to be able to go home and on their days off, just be themselves. Because registered nurses, anyone who lives in healthcare, are just people. Physicians are just people who just want actually a private personal life like everyone else does, want to have a successful career where we can, look after our families and build a little nest egg and, do what we were educated to do. And then we want to go home and we want to live a good life. I'm not sure that's, that should be what everybody has the opportunity to have. We shouldn't think that we're going to go to work and get hurt. We should never think we're going to go to work and not come home potentially. And we should never think that our job is going to take us over so much that we're going to have no other choice but to turn to something that we're going to be able to self-medicate on, because we don't have, every other option is not available to us. This does not make sense in 2023.
Yes, I agree. And I don't know if you've ever listened to past episodes. There's times where I've been critical of the mental health system, and I was turned away a couple times at the ER, and I wasn't taken into the psych ward, and things happen. But I try to. It's like, it's not the people working the system, in the system. It's whoever makes the decisions. That's where the problems are. I've never had a trouble with any of the nurses or with any of the staff or anything. It's always, because I get it, right? Their hands are tied too. It's like, we don't have room for you. I'm sorry. The one psychiatrist told me in the ER that unless you've attempted suicide, we won't even consider bringing you in to the psych ward. It's like, well, what if I was successful though? He's like, well, that's just the way it is. And I'm like, how is that an efficient system? But obviously it's the same with addictions right now. It's like, unless you basically have to if you overdose, you can't. Where am I going? I'm going all over the place now.
But I know what you're saying. I absolutely get what you're saying, Todd. And it is, well, part of it is that it's very siloed. People, like, different sections don't talk to each other.
Right.
Bottlenecks happen, and we have yet to have the political will to actually allow the people that do the work to give direction on how it should be managed.
100%.
We don't have, too many people are without care, so they end up in the emergency room. And the rest of the inn is, overflowing out the windows. And then we're discharging people because we're overflowing out those windows up top, but the bottom is chock full. So we're discharging people before they're ready to be discharged. The healthcare providers in the community, whether that's primary care, mental health, public health, whatever it is, home care, they're also up over their head, buried. And so someone gets home with this chronic condition, and their chronic condition starts to again become acute. So we've got this loop going, don't we? Where they're then back into the and good luck finding a physician that's actually accepting people. And then we have nurse practitioners who are trying to find their place in the system, which also is not easy, because there's a lot of tensions and a lot of crossover and a lot of turf protecting going on with different scopes of practice. And it's really hard to get our feet underneath us and figure out, this is the physicians, and it's where they work, and it's what they do and how they need to function. And this is where nurse practitioners are and where they're needed and how they need to function. And there's additional authorized practice registered nurses. And we've gotten so many layers of complications that at the end of the day, who pays for all that? The poor son of a bitch coming in the door who is so sick.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I I actually often hate thinking about it, because I get upset, I get emotional, and then it's like you feel useless, and you feel like, I try to have the podcast and create, a platform and stuff to help or to, whatever. But yeah, I get so overwhelmed, and
it can be absolutely overwhelming, but you know what? We have to just take a deep breath, brush ourselves off, and keep pushing forward.
yeah,
because it's voices like yours that are going to make a difference. You might think you're not making a difference. I got news for you. You're making a difference.
Oh, thank God.
Absolutely you are. I mean, but you don't go out and try to measure it. Just know it.
Right, right, yeah.
Because the minute we try to measure shit, that's when we're going to get disappointed.
Or compare myself to someone else that.
Oh, really? Don't do that.
Yeah, yeah,
Because,
I know.
it's because we can't. I mean, we've spent our time, all of us, alone or collectively, releasing our frustration, releasing our anger. Now it's time to do some work to get the ship back going in the right direction. And that's
Yeah,
why we're going to continue talking. We're going to continue asking for meetings. We're going to continue to do all those things and we're going to continue to talk about safe consumption sites, whether people like it or not, because it's, when we have how many overdose deaths already in this, the first quarter of 2023.
yeah.
you know
We're on par to break a fourth record, 4 years
right,
in a row.
right, so seriously, come on. So we just have to keep talking about it. We cannot go silent. We have to keep the message going, the conversation live. We have to keep talking about how good prairie harm reduction is and how needed it is in the community. And we just can't quit talking and get score those tiny victories. And it might seem like we're slogging up a sand hill some days, and maybe we are, but we have to have the glass half full mentality. Otherwise, we're just going to say, fuck it, and throw our hands in the air and not do anything. And I mean, I can't live with that either. And it
Mm-hmm.
is, and I think that's part of what 12-step programs help us with. It's just keeping going. And remember, today is the only what I have to worry about. It's not tomorrow or a fucking year from now. It's today, right?
It's progress, not perfection.
That's right.
That's my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, yeah. I worked with this really great guy at Pine Lodge, and I used to have conversations like this with him, and I'd get really upset and overwhelmed, and that's when I was doing like more advocating, like doing rallies and stuff like that. And why aren't people cluing in and and stuff? And he actually kind of held me by the shoulders and said, you know what, you're here working with addicts one on one. And he said that's the best thing you could do. Instead of trying to change the world, you're changing people one at a time, and that's we're doing God's work kind of thing. And I was like,
Like, absolutely.
yeah, it calmed me down. I was like, you know what? Yeah, I can see. I can see the difference. 28 days later, people leaving and just thanking me and hugging me. And yeah, at rallies, it's I don't know. I felt gross for like a week after doing a rally because I was just so amped up and angry, and it's like, you're chanting and doing stuff. It's like, you're probably not doing a damn thing. You're not helping anyone probably, but not saying that protesting isn't, a good thing.
Well,
But
it has its time and its place, but this is complicated work here when you're dealing with mental health and addictions. And whilst we need to have the rallies and we need to have the public outcry,
mm-hmm.
got to understand that people out there are living their lives, it's kind of like a bellows. It expands it expands and contracts on how much people can take in, how much they're willing to take part. And it also is an issue of relevance. As sad as it is, there's very few people whose lives nowadays, like on, the 16th of April of 2023, that haven't had mental health and addictions touch their life in one way or another, whether it's themselves or someone really close to them or an acquaintance, somebody who has. But until it becomes an issue of relevance for people, they're living their lives.
Mm-hmm.
They're living their lives. They just go on day to day, and their lives are busy, and they do things. And we have to be graceful about that. As frustrating as it can be, we have to give ourselves grace on that, because people are living their lives and doing the best they can, and we have to understand capacity, and that right in the moment, be it right or be it wrong, people are bringing all they've got to the table. That's it. Nothing more. And we have to accept that and move on and see, what inroad we can make at that time. Can't take it personal, as hard as that can be sometimes, because it's not about me, Tracy, or you, Todd. It's about what we can do together.
Yeah. And since I've started advocating like 6 years ago, there has been a lot of change in perspective, and a lot more people are talking, a lot more. It's in the media more, mental health, addictions, and stuff. But boy, it sure doesn't. Nothing's changed politically. That's the most frustrating part. It's like this stuff is not a political issue. Like it shouldn't be. There should be no politics in it. It's just these are facts. These are numbers. This is what would work. These are the people working on the ground that know what needs, how to improve it, but yet no one's being listened to. A lot of handshaking and head nodding, and then decisions not reflecting any of that.
Right. And that's, yes. And that frustration can eat us up if we let it. Absolutely. And it is, again, it's just, we just can't quit. I mean, I think about, people that I knew, and people that my grandparents knew, when the political winds were changing in Saskatchewan, and they worked really hard with Tommy Douglas, and even before that, women getting the vote. Like, it took a lot of hard work, it took a lot of disappointment, it took a lot of absolute self-will to keep going in the midst of nothing, of cruelty, of difficulty, of loss. But they didn't stop, they kept going. It just kept going. And when someone had to sit back, someone else took up the cause. It's just how things go.
Mm-hmm. It's so bizarre that we're kind of in that era again right now of like
We are.
grassroots stuff. It's like, I thought this was taken care of. Like, I have quite a few American listeners. For people that don't know who Tommy Douglas is, that Tracy just mentioned, he was the founder of Universal Healthcare, and he was the premier of Saskatchewan. So the province that we're in right now, and we're upset about decisions being made right now, we're actually the home of universal healthcare in the world. So which makes it even more frustrating.
Well, but it just, makes us even more determined that, universal health care is something to be fought for. And I mean, back in the day, they weren't afraid to go get into the streets and roll around in the mud and do what had to be done to save things. And, who's to say?
Now it's QAnon.
Yeah.
They're rolling around in the mud. And, do you think there's ulterior motive sometimes with the government? Like, do you think, like, I've heard people say, they want it to fail so then they can privatize everything. And I mean, that's a big claim, and I don't know if that's true or not, or, I don't know, but.
Well, they've been actually saying this since 1962. Then when we did get universal health care, it's always been under threat. It's never not been. And and it is just not, I mean, it is just not the ideology of the government of today they are all about privatization. But other governments that have been in here have also, there's been some privatization that has happened. But it is, it's just a constant rhetoric that's out there that publicly funded healthcare is always under attack, because it's seen as it depends on how people are, where we are in society with humanity. If we can manage to keep ourselves in the collective, if we can think about ourselves in community, that we are each other's keeper, that's the fundamental roots of universal health care, that we are looking out and after each other. Capitalism is not like that. So if we have, depending on, whether we have a democratic socialist type government where people's, and the minute you say that, people's hair gets a little bit, lit on fire, because they don't actually understand what that means. They just think, that they're going to be taken over by communists. It doesn't make any sense, but that's how they like to fearmonger. I'm
going to lose listeners because of this episode. I try not to get political usually, but I can't help it with this one. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, if we see private healthcare, or if we see healthcare and privatization as a way to make, some cronies some big dollars, while it might only be short-term big dollars, it's still big bucks.
Yeah.
That has a lot of pull.
Yeah, but it's interesting because, like you said, you used to work with Like Brad Wall's government, it's the same party, it's the same ideology, but yet he was more willing to, have it run efficiently and, have everybody happy.
Right.
And then the exact same party, different leader. It's just, it can go completely sideways real quick.
Well, but we are going to keep trying to talk. We are going to keep trying to do what is the right thing to do. And I mean, I hope you don't lose listeners, but
I don't know.
healthcare, whether and particularly mental health and addictions, is a political game. And
Yeah.
if we have to be willing to accept that, and we have to be willing to get into that arena. We have to, because if we don't, we're just going to be a bunch of talking heads who do nothing but, bitch and complain, but yet we're not willing to actually get into the cage and do the hard work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line of it. I mean, nothing's going to change without, political will to change it. It's the bottom line of it. We can't fear politics. And it's got, actually, at the end of the day, I don't give two shits who's sitting in the seat of power. We still have to work with them. We will work with them organizationally and personally. We will work with them, and we will keep being the voice of the people that we care for in this province. And and if we can get along and we can get things done, great. If we can't, we are bound by our licensure, by our legislation as registered nurses, to advocate for our patients. That's the law that guides us. Doesn't matter who's in the seat of power. I'm going to do that, and as the president of Sun, I'm expected to do that.
So are you running for MLA? Is that what you're saying?
No.
I've considered it, and then I've had friends that have worked in politics before. They're like, Todd, you won't last a week, buddy. Partly because of my ADHD.
I cannot imagine. Doesn't matter who you are politically. I can't imagine how COVID, even in my seat, the amount of vicious abuse that came, in the form of letters and phone calls and posts. I can't imagine what the different political parties and people, leadership there, what kind of abuse they've taken. I'm not up for that. Thank you. Like it, and nobody, it doesn't matter what stripe you are, politically, should have to face any of that kind of abuse. It's not right. We're here to work together, and for the best thing that we can do for the people of Saskatchewan. And that's what needs to come first. The rest of it, should just go off to the side. This is a blessing and a curse of us Saskatchewanians. The work ethic and it coming above everything else has not always worked in society's favor. It truly hasn't, because we have to allow ourselves time. Like we're not even really allowed to have time to grieve, it doesn't matter what the loss is. In society, we seem to think that, get up, brush yourself off, move on, and get on with it. And, we haven't. I mean, grief is a whole nother thing we could talk about. It's huge. It's deep, because that's one thing that I can say that actually happened with registered nurses, was this indescribable grief of the work and the relationships that they had with each other and with patients was torn away from them without their consent. That is huge. When what you set your life out to do, you're not able to do in the way that you had been doing it. It's a huge loss when you show up to work, because it's that relationship between a registered nurse and a patient is one that's almost sacred at times. And when other forces interfered in that and actually tore it apart and made it so that people could actually speak to registered nurses in the way they were, or allow themselves to treat them like they were, and saying those things and acting the way they were, and It was the death of what used to be a very sacred relationship that where people are working hard to rebuild, but it's tough. It's tough. Never did a registered nurse dream that she or he or they were going to walk into a hospital to be spit at on the way in. Never dreamt that I'd have never dreamt that. I'd have never dreamt as the president of Sun that I was going to, be talking to registered nurses who were, having suicidal ideations or never. I was having conversations prior to that about collective bargaining agreement and policies and bylaws, like the stuff that we normally talked about, and different things that we could do in society, and working with places like Prairie Harm Reduction and working with the food bank, and because there was lots of social issues prior to COVID, no two ways about it, but they've only just been absolutely exacerbated since COVID, and since just a whole societal shift has happened.
Or do you think the small town hospitals and nurses were they just as affected?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. If not, yeah, there is. Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it maybe has settled down a little bit now. But for quite some time, there were many little rural hospitals, rural remote facilities that were having to go called bypass. There wasn't enough people to actually take in an emergency. I mean, the whole entire facility did not shut down, but they weren't able to give emergency care. So that meant people had to find their way into the city. And that's really hard on people when you can't give the care that you are wanting to give. And when you live in a small community, how they say 6 degrees of separation. Well, when you're in a small community, it's like 1 degree of separation. So people, can come and talk to you or say things to you that are far more intimate, far more personal when you're in a smaller, community, and healthcare is kind of crumbling and you feel absolute ownership for it.
Yeah.
And it's a lot. Like, that's the difference between some aspects between urban and rural. In the urban settings, you can kind of get lost out in the city and people don't know who you are. But in small towns, Saskatchewan, everybody knows who you are.
Yeah. And part of that, I actually love that about my hospital, is that I do know these people from the community. When I go to the hospital, about a year ago, I spent a night in there after a big panic attack and whatever. And it was like, I used to drive school bus, and the nurse that saw me at the door that buzzed me in, she was a student on my school bus when I was a bus driver. And I was like, and she, I was so well taken care of. And then, it's nice that I could, when I was detoxing there for 2 weeks, I knew everybody. It was like, some of them are friends of mine I went to school with and stuff. So, I love that part of it, but I could see how that would be also really, really tough when you're in that position, because people are more comfortable to just tell you off or something, But.
Well, and yeah, it has, like I said, it's a blessing and it's a curse all at the same time. And some people would have chopped off their arm before they detoxed in their hometown hospital.
Right. Thank you so much, Tracy. I appreciate you personally. I appreciate your work you're doing. I appreciate Sun. I appreciate nurses. They have been there for me throughout my journey with mental health and addictions and depression and all that stuff. Whether it's my local nurses here in my little town in the hospital, to psych nurses on the psych ward, staying in the hospital, it's really, the nurses are the ones that are there more. I mean, you'll see the doctor for 2 minutes a day, maybe. And all the support staff, really. So I appreciate it. So thank you very much, Tracy. Don't forget, next week I'm speaking with Kristen Carter. She is an ADHD coach and podcaster. Please don't forget to rate and review the podcast. And if you have any questions or comments, please follow me on Instagram, Bunny Hugs Podcast, or on Facebook, Bunny Hugs and Mental Health. And for crying out loud, please remember to make your beds and take your meds. Bye.